listening to Workaholics Anonymous, a weekly discussion of terrible jobs, bad coworkers, awful bosses, and overcoming them for positive outcomes. Now here's your host, Breck Hall.
Thank you for tuning in to Workaholics Anonymous. My name is Breck, and this is my first podcast with this. I kind of got this idea just with a friend of mine. I'd always been bouncing podcast ideas off him, and I just came up with the idea of Workaholics Anonymous just as a platform for people to talk about the worst jobs they've had, terrible coworkers, worst bosses, type of thing like that. Kind of where I met all of my three best friends is from jobs, and I guess that just means either I have terrible people skills or just work too much, and the only people I can be friends with apparently have to be paid to work with them. Might want to cut that part out. So I actually met my three best friends from jobs that I've had before. My best friend Juan is met him through a job. He's always been that guy that's taking care of everyone. Met him through there. Ended up going on a couple trips together, and he's the one I do all my travels with, and pretty much bounce everything off with him. And then one of my best friends, Alyssa, met her through a previous job. She was actually a manager of mine. Then we ended up going to New York together with her and Juan, which was a fun trip. And then my other best friend, who I currently work with, Taylor, who's always been the guy that I really bounce ideas off with, company ideas, school ideas, like things we want to do in the future type thing. He's always been a solid guy and just a dude you want to be like. So currently, what my idea with this podcast is going to be is just I'm going to have a bunch of different people on talking about stories that they've had, because I know working and living in Utah County, that pretty much the only jobs we had growing up were call centers and fast food, and we've all worked our fair share of all of them. My friend was working at this solar company, and with the solar company, he kept trying to get me over there and kept trying to get me over there. Finally quit my job working for this insurance agent that I did pretty much all through high school. And at this solar company was like the most chop shop of a call center I've ever been at. It was ran by these two guys that lived out in Florida, pretty much like Italian mobsters. And with that, you could literally say whatever you wanted on these phone calls. I remember because we were calling states like New York, California, so these people already hated that you were calling. And so I remember my friend used to always say, like, call people and they'd be like, stop calling here. Or like, they just cut you out. And my friend would always be like, well, could I ask you a question? Are you just not interested in going green, or are you just not interested in saving money? I just can't understand which of those you're not interested in. And people would be livid. The turnover rate was insane at this place. Like, they would just have purges like once a month. Me and my friend would always joke about like getting fired and everything like that. I ended up leaving to go work at a car dealership for a couple months just because of how stressful it was and how everyone was getting fired. With that, and then eventually the head guy called me up on my phone and convinced me to come back. And he was always telling me these things like they were going to pay my way through college. It'd be such a good job for me in the future. I was going to make all this money, blah, 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 things like that. And so I ended up coming back. And when I came back, we worked for a couple months. It was fine. And then I ended up having foot surgery. I was gone for a week. And in this time, since they had told me I was going to make all this money and they were going to help me with everything, I ended up buying my first car because I was tired of driving my parents' one, and I was like trying to get a cool car. Was still in my senior year and everything. So I ended up getting a loan, buying the super cool car. Well, at the time, I thought it was a super cool car. Senior year, saving all this money. Supposedly, I was going to work 40 hours a week with these guys. So I get this car, and then like a month and a half, 2 months later, I ended up needing foot surgery. So I go on foot surgery, and I'm gone for a week, whatnot. And then I ended up, I told myself I was going to go back a little early just because I wanted to show them I was driven, show them I was like there to work hard, just because they said they had believed in me and stuff like that. So I go back for a couple days on crutches, and it was like My grandma's had to drive me there, and my grandma had to pick me up just because I couldn't drive because I was on Percocets and stuff like that. And they picked me up and everything. And it was like a Wednesday that I got there. My grandma had dropped me off. They let me work half a day. And then it was like 10 minutes before lunch. The guy was like, the head guy in charge was like, hey, can I talk to you downstairs? And I was like, downstairs? I had to crush all the way downstairs. So I hobbled downstairs, like one by one. And then they pulled me in a room and he was like, hey, so I just want to talk to you because your numbers have been down last week. And I was like, yeah, because I've been sick and I've been recovering. And he was like, yeah, I hate to let you know, but we're going to have to let you go. And I was like, right after I had bought my car, right after they had told me they were going to work through me all through college and all this stuff. So I have to hobble back up the stairs, go out the front door. And me and my best friend, we always used to make jokes that we got fired and stuff like that because all of our friends did. Like every person that had worked there had been many purges and we just barely made it through. He calls me because he worked on the other side because they eventually split us up because they didn't like us sitting by each other. And he called me and he's like, so where are we going to lunch? And I was like, oh, I got fired. And he was like, no, okay. Are you going to meet me by my car? Like, let's go to lunch. I was like, no, dude, I just got fired. And he was like, what? And that was the worst day because I literally had to wait. Like everyone came out the front office and they made me sit on the porch. They didn't even let me wait inside for my grandma to come get me. So that one was rough. My friend ended up working there a little while longer. The place ended up going out of business just because of how sketchy they were doing things. And the head guy that was in charge was like stealing leads from him and stuff. So it ended up just going downhill real quick. And that was like one of my first real job experience where I was just stressed. And then it sucked going out for job interviews the next couple of weeks. And like, how do you come back from saying you got fired from a place? Especially when you say it's not your fault and it's not your numbers. And then I was walking around in a boot and it was cold and it was a rough time. I just wanted to start this podcast just to talk about like, I wonder like what the statistics of like bad employers are versus bad employees. Because some of the stats I was looking up, that disengaged employees are costing U.S. companies about $550 billion a year. But also a stat that I found was 61% of employees are burnt out at their current job. So which part is the employer's fault and which part is the employee's fault? Like who's at fault for some of these things? Okay, so back to working at the terrible companies and things like that. I do have one story for the ages that I'm gonna have to get one on the list on, but that's for another episode, and that's for another time when we're still not so salty about it. So one of the other jobs that I wanted to talk about, probably one of my worst jobs, was right when I had turned 16. I got a job at the local fast food restaurant. Um, Also, one thing with this podcast that I think I'm gonna do, I'm not gonna say names of companies that are still around. Talk about people. We're gonna change their names because try not to get sued at a crispy age of 22. Um, so there was this fast food place I was working at right when I turned 16. They actually told me because I was trying to apply when I was 15, almost 16, and they were like, "Well, when do you turn 16?" I was like, "November 18th," and the lady was like, "Okay, see you then at 6 o'clock." So I started my first fast food restaurant on my 16th birthday, and with that, um, it was the grimiest and the slimiest thing. At first, I got hired to work the front counters because that's what I'm good with talking with people, I feel like. And that's what they told me at first. But then when I started, they were like, congrats, you're in the back flipping burgers. With this job, it was like bare minimum wage, 7.25, and I would just work like 2 or 3 hours a night. I'd be scheduled for like 4, but only work like 2 just because they'd get me in, do the worst jobs, like scrape the ceilings up with the grease thing, clean the grease traps underneath the sink and stuff like that, and then they would have me skedaddle and be right out of there. Um, it was honestly the grossest job. It was the worst. Like when people from high school used to come in and see me, and I was just wearing the greasiest clothes. Like I remember one time when I got off work and I was driving home, my shoes were so greasy. I used to just leave them out on the front porch because they weren't coming in the house. But with that, when I was driving home one time, my foot literally slipped off the gas pedal because of how much grease had been underneath my shoes and stuff like that. Um, I worked there and they were like the meanest old ladies that used to work the front counter at this place. Um, just acted like they were running a Fortune 500 company at little this little fast food joint. Uh, I worked there for about like 4 or 5 months. Just kept getting shafted on shifts. Just had to clean the grossest things out. Just cleaning grease traps and things like that. That's when I ended up getting my job at the insurance place, and worked there for a long time, pretty much all through high school. My old boss of that place is actually still a good friend of mine that I keep in contact with. Me and all my old friends used to work there. There's some stories with that place that we'll have to probably talk about next time. But pretty much my whole idea with this podcast, I know it's pretty rough for a first one, is just to get stories out there like that. Think about all the fun things you did in high school, all the terrible jobs that you didn't think were that bad in high school. And looking back now, they were that bad. And just thinking about the things you used to do for $7 an hour. But next time I plan on having another person on the show just to do an interview with. If anyone's interested or got any cool stories or experiences like that, please reach out. This is the end for this one. Thank you. Bye. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. You can follow me on my socials. My Instagram is BreckTravisHall_. Make sure to give me a follow. Share this with your friends, your aunts, your uncles. Mom, I love you. This is the first place I will ever get to say that. But if you guys if you want to be the next guest or have anyone that you'd like to recommend, please shoot me a message on Instagram. Feel free to reach out. Thanks, and see you next week.